you for joining Think, Build, Launch podcast. This program is an extension of Marl Startup Studio. Marl Startup Studio was started to support students and first-time founders while they're at the idea stage of their startup. We believe there are so many innovative ideas in our community that get missed simply because people do not have the structure to take their idea into an actionable plan. That is exactly what we do. We help you take your idea into a structure in which you can get support to build your idea. Before I jump into today's program, I want to congratulate all of the recent graduates in our region. We have over 19 schools, as well as over 800,000 students. And so there's been a lot of celebration going on. One celebration in particular I'd like to talk to you about, Rochester Institute of Technology had the keynote speaker, Kimberly Bryant from Black Girls Code. And she said something that really inspired me. Kimberly Bryant says, "I don't know what valleys each of you may experience along your journeys. So I want you to learn to give yourself what she calls grace in the valley, to lean on your community in your times of tribulation, and to create a safe space for others when they need it most, especially our leaders who often carry the weight of the world on their shoulders." All right, I'm ready to jump into today's program. Today, we get Nasir Ali, who actually launched the Syracuse Technology Garden Incubator in 2004. And many of you are familiar with the Tech Garden. In fact, the Genius New York grant is from that area. In 2011, he also launched StartFast Venture Accelerator and has helped over 48 pre-seed startups between that time and today. I know him personally through the Upstate Venture Connect. He's the CEO and co-founder of Upstate Venture Connect, which is an online communications platform that reaches more than 15,000 startup community members. And he created the UNY 50 Entrepreneurship Leaders Group, which is founders aggregated to help support and mentor many of the startups in our region. And finally, he established Upstate Unleashed Conference, which is a really great conference that brings people from Albany, Buffalo, Rochester to Syracuse to celebrate all of the really great startup activities that are in our region. I'm very happy to welcome you to the show today, Nasir. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's so good to be meeting in person.
Oh, it's wonderful. It is absolutely wonderful. Let's talk about your initial vision. You moved to the region in 2004, is that correct?
Yes, my wife got a great opportunity in Syracuse, and so we packed up our bags in Washington, D.C., sold our home, and made the move.
Wow. How was it coming and establishing yourself new in the region, and what vision did you have that, now a decade later, looking back, what do you see and what's changed?
Well, when I first moved, I was thinking, hey, I've worked in tech and business and strategy for a long time. I'm a startup person. I'm sure I'll find similar people and we'll do something like that in Syracuse. And I was very surprised to find that, the focus on startups was almost non-existent because everybody was just trying to figure out where the next big employer would come from. And that's not something they were planning to grow, but to import. And so there was a lot of focus on economic development policies and giveaways and things like that. And I was fortunate enough to meet up with a number of people who were affiliated with the Syracuse Chamber of Commerce, and they had started an Entrepreneurs Council. The idea being that they realized that for their community to thrive and grow, they needed to have homegrown successes. And that's really how it all got started. And we started running some experiments in the early 2000s after opening the incubator, getting a seed fund going, getting an amazing collaboration supported by the Kauffman Foundation with Syracuse University that allowed us to keep talented students with entrepreneurial ambitions in the city during the summer, have them work under the mentorship of students. And so it all started to kind of come together in some ways, and many of the fruits of those efforts are now visible in downtown Syracuse in terms of a thriving number of companies that have grown there, that have been supported by the community and the business community, and really are making their mark.
So in our region, between the 19 colleges, there are 800,000 students. I really like that paradigm shift from doing economic development by importing successful companies versus nurturing and helping them grow the soil here. Although a lot of your initial effort was focused in the Syracuse community, I've noticed that it spans Buffalo and Rochester as well. What are some of the things that as we continue to learn how to nurture rather than import, probably nurture and import, what are some things that we need to do better as a community to help that thrive?
So that's a great question. Jen, Rochester alone has, as you mentioned, 19 colleges and almost 100,000 students. When you expand that across the region, it's actually 104 colleges and close to, like 1 million students. So, so it's or 500,000 students, I should say. And the opportunity that we have is that we attract talent from all over the world, right? But as long as they stay within the silo of a campus or a department or something, their natural instinct is to spend their time here and leave. And the opportunity that we realized when I was in Syracuse was that we can actually engage them, connect them with the community, and they don't have to leave when they graduate. In fact, this might be the most logical place where they decide to stay. So there's a company called Density that was a case in point. The founder was a young man who was an English major at Syracuse University, and he taught himself to code. And then he went through our program at Syracuse Technology Garden, and decided that he and his friends wanted to stay after graduation because they felt now they had a network of business mentors, and that this was as good a place as any where they could start. And today, that company is a unicorn valued at over $1 billion. And that wouldn't have been possible if we didn't have that nurturing opportunity to engage with them outside of the classroom, give them a place where they could come downtown, a place where they could meet. And I think that as I look across today, what's amazing about the ecosystem is that similar spaces and programs are operating in almost every metro area, whether you have Raven Ithaca or NextCore here in town, or, just what's wonderful about this is how that model has just been adapted and grown, and more there is an opportunity for engagement. And even the universities are making more of an effort to expand their boundaries.
Wow, that's great. When you talk about engagement, it sounds like relationships matter and the mentoring matters. Can you share a little bit about your mentorship strategy and maybe some advice that you actually give those that are on your platform?
Sure. So, when we started Upstate Venture Connect, my partner Martin Babinek and I spent a lot of time talking to founders who were from upstate, but in other communities around the country. And the question we asked them was, well, why Boston, or why Silicon Valley, or why New York City or Washington, D.C.? And what was fascinating was that every one of them said, when I got here, I found my tribe. And that was a function of two things. One was that those areas already had a concentration of people that were involved in building new companies. So this notion of why wouldn't you work for a big company wasn't the default. The second thing was that there's a culture in those locations where access to those people is not restricted, it's not guarded, it's more open, and those people are ready to pay it forward, ready to give back to the community by helping emerging founders. And that's really been a big part of what we have tried to do. And when I am providing advice to anyone on our platform, it's really prefaced by the fact that I may not be the best person, but it would be my goal to try and connect them with the best person. And that's what they should be doing, is trying to find that and not feel limited by their network. And that's really the principle behind Upstate Venture Connect, and why we want to be in some ways an aggregator of this vast network of upstate founders and also alumni and expats, and be a pathway for people to find folks, because otherwise it's very easy to feel like you're the only one trying to build a high growth business and you don't know anybody. And, so it's a big piece of the mentorship is to understand that I'm giving to you, and the goal is not that you try to repay me, but you try to help somebody else, because everyone's on a journey and there'll always be people that can use what you have learned. And that's the cultural shift and change of the entrepreneur mindset that we try to inculcate.
I love the paradigm shift here because, it used to be reciprocity, that type of model, but yours is more of, the best way to say thank you is to make a difference somewhere else. And I also see is that being a very active process, students need support and mentors have a desire to connect, but they both have to be almost seeking each other's hand for their hands to connect. Yes. And so I think it's a really great point that you're making. As you look at the next, it must be really fun just seeing the cross-pollination that's occurring all the way from Albany to Buffalo. And, one of the things that I really hope that our listeners do is go to uvc.org in order to see the wonderful event calendar. The event calendar has really been built to support all entrepreneurship and startup activities across the region. How has Upstate Unleashed the conference has been a really great centering point for people across the regions to come, all of Upstate and Midstate, Downstate, South. What are the regions that are represented there sometimes?
We have participants from all over the region, and what we are trying to do in that is we don't do a lot of events. It's our only event. And historically, the goal behind it was to recognize the diversity, and not just the founders, but also the people that are helping support the community. And unfortunately, due to COVID, even though we had a massive event online, it didn't have the same sense of connectivity. So we did a smaller founders retreat last year, which was exceptionally well received, and we'll probably do the same thing this year. But our hope is to go back to being a large scale event maybe next year once things settle down a little bit. The goal behind it was really to celebrate, but there are so many aspects that come out in there. The diversity of the founders that we have, the diversity of the kinds of businesses, the types of ideas, the kinds of products that they're working on. There's just an amazing showcase. I have to say that there's a lot more of that type of showcasing going on. So NYSTAR, for instance, has a wonderful event that they're doing in the fall. Our friends at Fuse Hub organize that. And Launch New York is doing similar things in Western New York. So there's a lot more of those things happening, but you can never have enough. Well,
the reason I wanted to mention it is that I remember there being a Catalyst Award, and sometimes people don't recognize the bees that carry the pollen, right? And so there's the startups and the great companies and the great investors, but the system and the ecosystem that you've built really values the people that do make the connections and make it's like constellation and people that connect those dots. I think it recognizes well. Well, we'll definitely maybe have you on as a guest closer to that when the conference happens again, which is really wonderful. I'm so glad that you came on the show. How can people reach you?
Nasir@uvc.org.
Okay, great. We'll make sure those links are included. All right. As we close our program today, I'd like to thank Startup Grind Rochester, Upstate Venture Connect, Upstate Capital of New York, NextCore, RIT, and University of Rochester for your partnership with the Marl Startup Studio and collaboration to this tipping point that we have in entrepreneurship here in Rochester. Finally, I would very much like to thank our producer, Scott Fitzgerald at Rockbox Studio. If you have an idea and want to know more about our program, connect with me, Jennifer, at marlaccelerator.com. Please subscribe to our program, and we will continue to provide information and inspiration about taking your idea from a concept to a business. This is Jennifer Sertl. Thank you for joining us.